Can you all send me one? XL. Thank you.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball. We are going to be covering over the next 3 shows Dynasty Rookie Rank. So we've done a lot of NBA draft stuff, a big, almost 2-hour podcast straight after the draft with myself and Greg Ehrenberg going over the draft. A few undervalued players I looked at in Monday's show, and what we're going to be doing now is looking at all 60 players who were drafted, plus a couple of the undrafted guys, and trying to assemble them into an order from 1 through to about 65 of where I view them, especially when viewing it from the long-term perspective of Dynasty rookie drafts. Now, for redraft leagues, there's probably going to be 3 or 4 rookies who I'd feel comfortable taking in those leagues. You're looking at guys like DONCIC, like AYTON, like Bagley perhaps, Trae Young, and maybe someone like Wendell Carter. But it's not going to be big chunks of guys with other players seeing limited minutes. But Dynasty, we're looking long-term. We're looking 3 years, 6 years, 8 years down the track and trying to work out who is going to be the best value in this spot. Now, as I said on yesterday's call-in show, someone did ask me the question, when you're in a Dynasty league, how are you valuing guys who don't fit your punt build? Unless you're one of the top 1, 2, 3 teams, you shouldn't be looking at that. Look to get the best player available, similar to how GMs should be approaching the actual NBA draft, and then you can adjust stuff down the track in 2 or 3 years' time. And that's what I'm hopefully trying to do here. Now, it's not an easy task trying to go through these guys and rank them. Stuff can change all the time. Free agency can change, players can change, developmental curves can be very, very different. But this is, at this point in time, the way I'd be approaching looking at these rookies from a Dynasty value. So those of you who are in Dynasty leagues with me, with Dynasty rookie drafts coming up, this is what I'm going off at the moment, but this was very much subject to change. And even when I did this list a day or so ago, and even looking at it again today, I'm going, you know what, I'm not so sure about some of these. Maybe I'd change them up. So it is very close in many, many spots, and that's quite reflective of how the actual value of this NBA draft was at the time that it was going down. Michael Bolton, what should we do?
Let's get to it.
I'm really happy with that idea, Mr. Bolton. Let's start with the guy who I believe it's going to be the number 1 player in Dynasty formats, I believe anyway. And that is, of course, the player that ended up going with pick number 5 in the draft to the Dallas... Well, that's not true. He went with pick number 3 in the draft and then traded to the Dallas Mavericks in exchange for pick number 5, and that is LUKA DONCIC, out of Slovenia, a 6'7", point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, however you want to characterize him. Some really impressive numbers over in Europe: 21, 7.5, and 6.5 per 36 minutes, 1.5 steals, 45 and 80. His shooting percentages weren't great in Europe. I'm not worried about it. He is a good shooter. He gets that shot off. He can create distance with step backs. He can get to the rim. He's a big-assed, big-bodied player. I'm not worried that the shooting percentage looks all that poor. He won't come in as a 40% three-point shooter. He might not ever get there. But a guy who I have, I guess, likened his play style to, not necessarily a player, well, definitely not a player comp because this bloke just won an MVP, but he does look a little bit like James Harden. And Harden's a guy who subsists with their 36, 35, 37% three-point shooting, and is obviously one of the best, if not the best, offensive player in the NBA. And he's able to do that with that, what you would call potentially a subpar shooting. So DONCIC is that guy that I want to think he's got a realistic chance of being a top 70 guy for this upcoming season. A lot of that's going to depend on the minutes that Carlisle gives him. If he gives him 32 minutes a night, he'll probably be a top 50 player. He's got top 20 upside. He's got probably top 15 upside. And if I held the number 1 pick in any Dynasty format, which I don't, DONCIC would be the guy that I would take, no questions asked. He is clearly, to me, on a separate level to the rest of the guys on this list. Now, you might think differently there, but having a player who can rebound, who can get assists, who scores, who hits threes, who gets steals, who hits free throws, who gets to the line, all those things add up to, assuming it all comes along at the proper rate of improvement, it adds up to fantasy gold, and that's what we're looking for in these Dynasty drafts. So to me, at number 1, we're looking at LUKA DONCIC, and if you're in a Dynasty rookie draft and DONCIC doesn't go number 1, let me know. I want to know how the draft played out. I want to know where he ended up going, because I know some leagues do their rookie draft straight after the NBA draft. I dislike that manner of doing the draft. I'd much prefer to see these guys in Summer League. That's why all my Dynasty leagues have that rookie draft happening at the start of August. Free agency's done. We've seen how these guys act in Summer League. But I know many of you have had your draft already. Let me know who went number 1 and where Doncic ended up going, because he is my number 1 guy. My number 2 guy, maybe some level of, what's the right word? Controversy. Not that this podcast is generating controversy in general. But at number 2, I have got Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr. of the Memphis Grizzlies, a guy that per 40 minutes for Michigan State last season playing out of position, and so much was hyped up. Oh, DeAndre Ayton, mate, he played out of position, played the 4, that's why his defense sucked. Jaren Jackson played out of position as well. He played the 4 and was the best defensive player pretty much in college. So that's part of why I look at Ayton's defense. We'll get to him in a second. And I look at it and I go, yeah, people go, he can definitely improve with his defensive ability. He was out of position in college. Well, so was Jackson, and he was still elite in that role. So we're looking at Triple J there, 20 and 10.5, 1 steal, but 5.5 blocks per 40 minutes is an astronomical rate. That's higher than what Anthony Davis was doing in college. 51 from the field, hit threes, and 80% from the free throw line. So you've got a big man who can be efficient, who can hit free throws, who can hit threes, who blocks at an astronomical level, whose passing is okay. The handle needs a little bit of work. The offensive upside is there, and if he gets that offensive upside going, we're talking top 15 type of player in fantasy in the next 4 seasons. Now, for this season coming up, his impact's going to be limited, playing either alongside Marc Gasol or behind him. He won't be really sniffing 30 minutes per game, I don't believe, probably in the 22 to 23 mark. And that might be enough for him to sneak into the top 120, but it's not going to be enough for him to be a player who is going to be able to achieve anywhere close to his ceiling for this coming season just because of that playing time. But if we're looking long term, Jackson has the ability, I think, out of all this class to be the number 1 guy, even ahead of Doncic. And if you look at just his raw college numbers, I don't think you'd be thinking that way. I clearly am. If I have pick 2, that's who I'm going for. I've got pick 3 in a couple of drafts, and I'm hoping that Ayton and Doncic go 1 or 2. Well, actually, I'm hoping that Doncic slides down. But if Ayton and Doncic go 1 or 2, I will run to the podium to take Jaren Jackson Jr. With that selection, he's got real star upside, defensive player of the year upside as well. And if you have a look, 538 actually released their Carmelo projections with long-term projection stuff. He is right up there. Doncic, out of the rookies, got the highest long-term upside, and Jackson, I think, is 2nd or 3rd out of that list, which basically mirrors what I've got happening on this one at the moment. So Jaren Jackson Jr., Triple J, he is my number 2 Dynasty player. Let's move on to number 3. And while I don't love this guy as a player, as a prospect, it is hard for me. I'm putting myself in this position. If I got pick 3 and Jackson and Doncic are off the board, would I be able to pass on DeAndre Ayton? And that's the tough one. I could have gone in a direction here with Trae Young. I could have gone with a guy like Wendell Carter. Maybe it's Marvin Bagley in this spot. But in the end, I think I just have to put Ayton in this spot. Really impressive numbers in college, 24 and 14, 2 assists, but it's the defensive issues that do give us concern, as I talked about earlier. Only 0.7 steals per 40 minutes is ludicrously low, comically low. 2.3 blocks per 40 minutes for a guy as his size as a center. Yes, playing power forward, but I just gave you that example with Jaren Jackson Jr., who played at the 4 as well, and averaged 5.5 blocks, over double the amount of blocks per 40 minutes that Ayton was able to put up. Now, 61% from the field is fantastic. 73 from the line is good, and I think he projects to become an 80% free throw shooter. He can hit his threes at 35%, so there's value in him there. But my concern with him is, differently to Jackson, is that if both of these guys got 24 minutes per night, Jackson's increased ability to block shots and probably hit threes at a higher rate puts him at an advantage. Ayton could very easily get 32 minutes a night, and he's probably got a higher upside to play 32 a night than what Jackson does, who might only ever top out at 29 minutes per night. But given them the same minutes, and then you have the defensive concerns of Ayton, which could plague him through his career. As the Suns start to get better, he might not be closing out games. Then his limited ability with those defensive numbers is a concern there. Now, we have to factor some of that into the system he played in Arizona, which is notoriously low in terms of defensive stats, blocks and steals. But a lot of guys that came out of Arizona, especially big men, and then came into the NBA. They had low steal and block rates in college. Lauri-Markkanen and Aaron Gordon. They came into the NBA, and those numbers haven't really skyrocketed or anything like that. And they're both big men, athletic men. Obviously, Aaron Gordon on the wing at times at the 4. Big, athletic, strong, quick guy. Lauri-Markkanen, huge player playing at center. Those numbers haven't really risen. So how much of that is just the system? How much of that is the fact that they're just not great defensive stat generators? And that's sort of where I look at DeAndre Ayton. But his scoring ability was fantastic. But again, on Phoenix, Devin Booker's the number one option. Is Josh Jackson, TJ Warren, where are they fitting into the pecking order? Are they 2 or are they 3 behind Ayton? Are we really going to go back to a feed the man low in the post style of bullshit that Charles Barkley wanks over underneath his desk every night? I don't know. I don't think that'll be the case. Ayton's pick and pop game has something. He can hit threes. He can do a lot of stuff low block. But we heard, his post work, his footwork is incredible. And that's exactly what was said about a certain man called Jahlil Okafor, who struggled defensively and who had elite advanced post moves. And it's just not valuable in the NBA. So that's my concern with Ayton, but I can't let him fall past 3. And if you took him at 2 over Jackson, I wouldn't have any concern there. I wouldn't do it over DONCIC. But if you want to take him at 2, I don't think that it's that. I don't think it's really egregious at all as a decision. Pick number 4, or in my Dynasty rookie ranks for number 4, is Trae Young out of Oklahoma, the 6'2" point guard. He averaged a whopping 31 points per 40 minutes, carrying the load for Oklahoma last year. Almost 10 assists and 4.5 rebounds, 2 steals and 42 and 86. I'm not worried by the low field goal percentage. He carried an enormous load for Oklahoma last season. He led the team with a 37% usage. He had a 49% assist rate, meaning basically when he was on the court, he was either shooting it, turning it over, or assisting someone's shot. So basically no one on this team was generating any assists or any self-created shots when Trae Young was on the floor. Now, Atlanta doesn't have high-level offensive players on their team, but it's not going to be to this level. Now, we're hearing talk out of maybe Dennis Schroeder isn't going to go. I still think that Schroeder won't be around by the start of the season, and we're hearing this talk that maybe him and Young can play together. I think Trae Young is probably the guy that I'd look to have the best rookie season fantasy-wise out of all these guys, marginally ahead of DONCIC, ahead of Ayton as well. But long-term, the defensive concerns with him, as a team starts to get good, is he going to be able to jack those shots that's probably going to lead to his value in 17-18? But we look at him as, don't look at him as the next Steph Curry, because it's bullshit, because there's no next Steph Curry. Like, Steph Curry is Steph Curry. Can he be a useful shooter? Cool. Can he hit 2.5 threes a game? Can he hit 3 threes a game? Absolutely he can. But the thing we also need to know is he does generate steals. As a bad defender, he still gets steals, and he gets assists in really high numbers as well. And I was deliberating here, do I put Trae Young here at number 3 in my ranks? I wouldn't have any issue with doing that, but he still, obviously, like Ayton, has those defensive concerns which we have to be able to mitigate to have confidence in him being that guy. But I wouldn't want to let him slide any further than pick 4 in a dynasty draft. The value for him is really strong, and I do like what he can do now. The 538 stuff is pretty relatively bullish on his overall long-term projection and what he can do this season with a decent enough role, and I tend to agree with that. It was weird looking at all these 538 projections, and they're tying in line pretty significantly with the stuff that I was able to look at in terms of my statistical translation stuff. The field goal percentage is probably going to be a little bit rough for Trae Young this coming season, but if he averaged 17 points per game, I wouldn't be stunned. If he averaged over 2 threes and over 6 assists, I wouldn't be stunned with almost 1.2, 1.3 steals. And that is bordering on a top 50 fantasy player for this year. And I think he tops out as probably a top 35, top 30 guy. I don't think he can ever become a top 20 guy like Jackson or DONCIC. And even Ayton has that top 20 upside. I'm not sure Young gets there, but I feel pretty good about what he's going to be able to do for this Atlanta Hawks team, especially in the next couple of seasons. Let's look at the guy I have at number 5, and it is, coincidentally, Mo Bamba, number 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Goes to the Orlando Magic with pick 6 in the draft. 7-foot center with the monster wingspan, standing reach of almost 10 feet. 17 and 14 per 40 minutes he averaged for Texas. The assists are comically low. 0.7 per 40 minutes is an astonishingly low number. 1 steal is also not great. But block shots at a huge rate. And you can compare him. 4.9 per 40 minutes. Triple J, 5.5 per 40 minutes. DeAndre Ayton, 2.3. It's a significant difference in that block rate. 54 from the field, 68 from the free throw line. So that free throw percentage is somewhat of a concern, especially if it gets onto volume. Yeah, if you're hitting below 70 but getting 4 attempts per game, that becomes punt free throw territory. Now, we've seen a change in his shooting mechanics. Can he develop a 34, 35% three-point shot? I'm a little bit skeptical of that initially. He does have strength issues. He's obviously really long, but he still has some concerns with his overall game. But fantasy-wise, he projects well because of that block rate and that high rebound rate. But if we're looking at it from this coming season, Nick Vucevic is still there. Now, Vuce has been very productive for this Orlando Magic team. He's clearly not the future there, and I think if they could find a way to get off his contract at a reasonable price, they would look to do that. I don't think that'll necessarily happen before the season starts. Biyombo, I don't give two shits about him and his value. Bamba should be heading straight into that backup role ahead of Biyombo as early as the beginning of the year. We'll see what happens in preseason, but I think that Mo will be that backup center from day one, playing 18 to 20 minutes per night. Get him to 27 and he's a standard league guy. I think his upside is much more limited than the 4 guys ahead of him, which is really what we're looking at in terms of dynasty value. But I think Bamba, with that ability to block shots, and if he can develop a three-point shot, which is not there yet, but if he can get to 0.7 or 0.8 threes per game and do it while still being over 50% shooter from the field, then that upside can be realized. So he's the guy that I would look at pick number 5 in any sort of dynasty format that I'm looking at. He is obviously very intriguing, but he is far from a guaranteed type of guy. Again, 538 really likes his upside. They like it more than Trae Young. I'm a little bit below that in terms of that, but they think he can actually be a positive player this season with his defensive ability. And as I said, I think he can slot into a 20-minute role, 18-minute role pretty much straight away. Vooch has never been a picture of health. He could be traded by the trade deadline as well, and we could see 27 minutes of Bamba down the stretch and really putting up top 60, top 70 type of numbers in the March-April portion of the 2018-19 season. We're not there yet, but that's sort of where we look at him, but I just have some upside concerns. Or maybe not upside concerns, some concerns of his ability to reach that upside. Maybe that's a better way of phrasing it when looking at what Bamba can do from an overall fantasy perspective. But he is my number 5 guy. Now, many of you will be looking at this and go, Josh, the player who was picked number 2 in this draft, Marvin Bagley III, you've done 5 guys here and you haven't even gotten to him yet, which is obviously true. So, at pick number 6, it's Marvin Bagley III of the Sacramento Kings, a guy that put up really good scoring numbers for Duke last season. 25 points per 40 minutes with 13 boards. But again, like a lot of these guys, the concerns are here. 2 assists per 40, not good. 1 steal per 40, not good. 1 block per 40, horrendous for a guy whose best position is center. Not taking anything away from Vlade Divac. Actually, let's rephrase that. Taking everything away from Vlade Divac. Marvin Bagley is not a 3. He will struggle as a 4. I think his best position is a 5, but he can't protect the rim. That is the real concern. Now, he finished super efficiently because he's a great athletic big man, great second jump guy, great offensive rebound, great pick and roll, alley-oop threat, really super athletic on the boards, and that contributed to that 61% from the field. But most of that was finishing at the rim. The three-point shot is far from reliable for Marvin Bagley. He's nowhere near there yet. The defensive stuff is he claims he's a good defensive player. He's wrong. He's got a long way to go on that end, and the stats have told us that. A lot of the advanced statistical translations for the draft show him and Ayton as being probably 2 of the worst big men prospects in defense to come in a considerable amount of time, worse than Jahlil Okafor, worse than Lauri Markkanen, and you're really struggling in that sort of a zone. And the thing we also have to worry about is, for the initial season, how many minutes is he going to get with Dave Yeager screwing things up in Sacramento? We know that he's giving the old Dutch rider to Zach Randolph as often as possible. We know Costa Koufos is really keen, or he's really keen on him. There's Cauley Stein, there's Skal Labissiere, and I read a lot of things about Bagley. Oh, he's going to come in, he's going to be the best player in this team immediately, and he's going to get all these minutes. That's just bullshit. That is absolutely blatantly false. He is not the best player in this team. He might be the best player in this team. At this point, he is not. That is Bogdan Bogdanovic. That is, maybe it's Bud Hield next. Then you look at other guys. Is it Corley Stein? Is it Darren Fox? Probably not. I'd be okay thinking that Bagley could be the third, maybe the second best player. But at this point, he is not the best player in this team. He's not even close. And Jaeger is not bringing him in and playing him 32 minutes a night from the get-go. I don't believe. Now, maybe things have changed, but Jaeger has never had this mentality with him. He was playing Garrett Temple 31 minutes so that Bogdan Bogdanovic, a proven professional MVP European level player, he was playing limited minutes so that Garrett bloody Temple could play 30 plus minutes. Now Bagley is a high level prospect, but there is no way a guy who struggles defensively, struggles at the rim, into defense, protecting the rim defensively, Jaeger's going to go, you know what? This is my guy. I just don't see it happening. Now, we're talking about long-term prospects as well, and he will get it. He will get those minutes. He will score. But can the defense come along? That is the real concern. That's why I have him down at number 6 in these dynasty ranks. I think in a lot of leagues, especially if they don't include people that listen to this podcast, he'll go in the top 3. And that will enable you, if you're at pick 4 or pick 5, you'll be able to get a Trae Young to slide. You'll be able to get Triple J to slide. You'll get some value there because Bagley, I think, will end up going significantly higher than where I currently have him pegged. He could clearly be better than this, no doubt about that. He's a talented player. He's athletic. He can score, and that's all great. But that lack of defense is a real concern, and even that free throw percentage, that can be a problem if he's getting hacked a lot on offensive rebounds, on putbacks. That can be a real problem too. So it's something that we do have to pay a pretty decent level of attention to, I believe. Let's look now at the 7th guy on my list, and you'll notice that the top 7 picks in the NBA draft equal my top 7 dynasty picks. It doesn't always work that way, but it did happen this year. And at number 7, I have Wendell Carter Jr., the 6'10" center from Duke, who will be playing for the Chicago Bulls. He averaged 20 and 13.5 last season per 40 minutes. 3 assists is a nice number as a center, 1.2 steals and 3.1 blocks. He has his own defensive concerns. They're not the same as DeAndre Ayton's. They're not the same as Marvin Bagley III's, but they're still there. The block rate's not ideal. But he is still, I think, got more of an ability to switch than necessarily those guys, especially Bagley. Can protect the rim a little bit better, but he's strong offensively, moves the ball. I think he's one of those guys who you might see that assist rate from what he was doing in college really spike in the NBA. We've seen a few of those big men, like a guy like Bam Adebayo, not that he had a great assist season, but he wasn't really able to do any of this stuff at Kentucky. He came into the NBA and he went, shit, look what's going on here. How is he firing off these passes? And there's been a few of those guys over the last couple of years that can develop this passing game in the NBA. And I think Carter might be able to do that. Strong efficiency, decent free throws, good field goal percentage. And of course, when we look at the position in Chicago here, Chris Felicio, Robin Lopez. Maybe Lopez starts ahead of Carter this season, but Carter is the future at center. The defensive pairing with Larry Markkinen is going to be a concern. But I think that Wendell could actually be a standard league option this season at times. The high block rate, the high efficiency, the good free throws, the good assists, good rebound numbers could lead him to be a top 150 player this season with stretches of top 100 value. But overall, when we're looking at Dynasty, I probably wouldn't consider him ahead of Bagley. Obviously, I had him lower than Bagley for a reason. But if you wanted to go that high and you thought he was the 5th best player, I could totally understand that. He does have some significant value, and he's got a decent level of upside. So I do like Wendell Carter Jr. there for the Chicago Bulls. The 8th guy is a player, and this is where the draft starts to go out of order, a player that I did talk about in Monday's show when looking at the undervalued dynasty guys, and it's Mikal Bridges of the Phoenix Suns. Yes, he's older, but that 111 potential, the 111.5 potential. He averaged almost 2 steals and 1.3 blocks last season per 36 minutes for Villanova. High free throws, good efficiency, good scoring, okay rebounder, handles the ball a little bit, and in a situation where he could find himself in a decent role for the next couple of seasons at least, and maybe push forward. Now, I normally would be going for higher upside, younger type players at this point in the draft or in a dynasty draft, but I think that Bridges' ability to contribute over the next 4 to 5 seasons and that real solid defensive base that he brings makes him a hard guy to pass on at number 8. So he's the guy that was picked number 10 in the real NBA draft, so he's jumping a couple of spots up here to be number 8. And honestly, if you took him at number 7 ahead of Wendell Carter, I don't think that it would be a bad decision. The thing holding him back, and why I'm actually a little bit cautious of having him even at number 8, is the age. the 22-year-old age factor there. It gives me a level of concern when there are players 3 years, 2 years younger than him in the draft who've got those extra 2 years of development. But you can get 7 really strong years out of Bridges, probably have 7 top 150 seasons, or at least 5 top 150 seasons, maybe 4 top 100 type of years out of Bridges. And I think that is a pretty strong return if you've got pick 8 in a dynasty format, and that's the way I'd be going. So just to recap, let's look through the top 8 of these dynasty rookie rankings. We've got at number 1, LUKA Doncic. Number 2, JAREN Jackson Jr. Number 3, DeAndre Ayton. Number 4, Trae Young. Number 5, Mo Bamba. Number 5. At number 6, Marvin Bagley III. At number 7, Wendell Carter Jr. And at number 8, MIKAL Bridges of the Phoenix Suns. What we're going to do is we're going to cover the top 20 in today's show. So let's move on to the next group of players. At number 9, it's Michael Porter Jr. I'm really worried about Porter at this point. That the back injury is a concern. I think there's a chance we don't see him play at all this year. And if you wanted to wipe him off your board, I think that's fine. But when we're getting past pick 8, the upside of Porter as a scoring player is too hard to pass on. Now, I have concerns about his game, his lack of defense, his tunnel vision offensively, his potential to be inefficient. The defensive stats are a concern for someone like Michael Porter, but we didn't really get to see all that much of him last season for Missouri due to that back injury, and I'm not sure we're going to see much of him this year. But at pick number 9, I think he's very, very tough to pass on there. There's maybe one guy that I've got at pick number 10 who I would take over him just for absolute upside with a little bit more of a guarantee. But at pick number 9, it is very, very hard to go past Michael Porter Jr. Of the Denver Nuggets. But you're talking about maybe 2-3 years down the track, and even then, maybe it doesn't even work out for you just because of that back issue. At pick 10, it's Zaire Smith of the Philadelphia 76ers. He is one of these guys with absolute superstar upside. The value on the Carmelo projections on 538 is through the roof. All advanced draft models have him as superstar upside, but don't necessarily get there. He was a weird 6'4" guy playing power forward. That was part of the reason why his field goal percentage was so high. But there was a great article on Liberty Ballers today, the Philadelphia 76ers SB Nation site, talking about the value in youth, and he's very, very young. The fact that he's so much younger than all these players and was able to put up these numbers at the level that he was really, really impressive. The other thing about him is, and you look at him, he shot 45% from 3, and the biggest concern you have is with his shot, and you go, how can you be concerned with that shot? Well, he only took about 1 3-pointer per game, and I'll just bring that exact, 1.1 threes per game, 45%. But over the second half of the season, he was shooting actually better from 3 and taking about 2 attempts from 3. So started to up his volume and started to hit them at a better rate. Now, he only took 43s over the course of the season and hit 18 of them. You miss 3 more shots there, and you're talking about a real dip in that percentage, and that looks nowhere near as impressive. And also the 57% from the field, a lot of that is based on the fact that so many were alley-oops or shots taken close to the rim because him basically playing as a 4, but his advanced stuff is through the roof. His box score plus minus of 12 as a freshman is massive. Really good block numbers, really good steal numbers, and this is a player at pick number 10. When you're looking for star upside, if it all comes together, are we talking about mini Kawhi Leonard type of guy with defensive numbers? Maybe. But that offense really needs to come along, and Kawhi's offense wasn't good in college. So that's a possibility there for Zaire. I really think that his upside is significantly high, that you need to be looking at him really high in dynasty leagues, much higher than his actual draft spot. At pick 11, I've gone with the other of the Bridges, and that is Miles Bridges, who heads to Charlotte. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist has been playing the 3, Nick Batum and Jeremy Lamb there on the wings. So it's not like there's elite prospects in front of Miles. He averaged almost 22 points and 9 rebounds per 40 minutes for Michigan State last year. 3.5 assists. The defensive numbers do hold him back a bit, 0.8 steals and a block, but nice numbers shooting the ball, 36 from 3, 39 in his freshman year. Hit his free throws at 85%, which was a whopping change from 69.
Giggity!
As a freshman. So some pretty decent changes there for Miles Bridges, but This is a guy who I do like his offensive ability. He can play up positions as well. Maybe there's a chance that he takes some minutes away from Marvin Williams at times on this team. But it's the lack of defense does give me, or lack of defensive stats does give me some room for pause with Miles Bridges. But again, Batum, they might tear it down and move him on. Kid Gilchrist is not working out necessarily as a starter level player. There's a new coach in town. They might have different priorities as opposed to what Steve Clifford did during his time in Charlotte. So lots to change there. And Bridges of the Miles variety is the guy that I'd be looking at pick number 11. Then we've got pick number 12, basically marrying what happened in the NBA draft, and that's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander out of Kentucky, who is now part of the LA Clippers. The Clippers they're definitely going to be waiving Milos Teodosic. Austin Rivers has opted in. Lou Williams is there. Who knows what's going to happen with Patrick Beverley? I'm not expecting much from Gilgeous-Alexander for this season. The steal rate was really nice. He hit his free throws at a good rate, but much like Zaire Smith, good old DRC, Gilgeous-Alexander was able to hit threes at a decent rate, but it was on limited attempts. 40% from three on 1.5 attempts per game, 23 out of 57 over the season. Yeah, that's a level of concern, but steal rate really, really strong. 2 steals per 40 minutes, 6 assists, 5 boards, 17 points. It's more of an upside type of a play, but I do think that Gilgeous-Alexander, with his length, I think the shot can come around pretty well, and I think that that's a nice upside play. And when going back and looking at this, I probably would consider having him ahead of Miles Bridges just because of that defensive upside that he brings. Probably not going to be the scorer that Bridges is, and that might weigh it in one way or the other. But the ability of Gilgeous-Alexander to get the assists, to get the steals, and to hopefully be efficient while still being a good free throw shooter, which is a positive correlator for being able to figure out your long distance shot in the NBA. That's why I like Shai there at pick number 12, or ranked number 12 in my Dynasty rookie ranks. Let's go on to the next 4 guys at pick number 13. This is one of those ones where I looked at it and went, oh, Josh, you made this list, but really, do you want Colin Sexton at pick number 13? I think part of why I put Colin Sexton there, his translational numbers aren't great. Steals low, bad assists, doesn't block shots, no rebounds, not a good shooter, poor field goal percentage. And this makes him sound like he's a terrible player, but he's not. But part of the reason why I did put him there, and I was considering having him significantly lower than this in the overall value, is the fact that I'm assuming that LeBron James is leaving. So maybe for the next 3 years, you get high usage Colin Sexton, who just bludgeons his way into points. He averaged 25.5 points per 40 minutes last season. Now, under 5 assists, which is bad for a point guard. 5 rebounds and only 1 steal. Concerns there. 34% from 3 on 5 attempts. A real gunner mentality. Didn't hit his 2s at a high rate, under 50%. 78 from the line. And nothing overly great. Defensive box score plus minus of 0. And just as I'm mentioning this, Woj has just tweeted that the Los Angeles Clippers are trading Austin Rivers for Marcin Gortat to the Washington Wizards. Stunning. I was just talking about the Clippers and their guard action. Rivers is gone. Gortat to the Clippers. Does that mean that DeAndre Jordan is gone? This really does bump things up significantly for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Milos gone. Rivers gone. You got Lou Williams. You got Pat Bev. You got SGA now. This is very, very interesting from the Clippers. Again, literally just happening as we are speaking. A stunning trade, to be honest, just because of the Doc Rivers, Austin Rivers situation. Stunned. And I don't know what that means for Gortat, but I think it means that either one of Harrell, the table Montrezl Harrell, or DeAndre Jordan is out in LA. Gortat's not that good anymore. This does open up some minutes for Kelly Oubre in Washington as well. Really, I'll have to get back to this a little bit later, but that's a stunning deal. Now back to Colin Sexton as a player. I think he's in real trouble in terms of his long-term upside, but if you're looking for 3 to 4 years of value, maybe he can do that if LeBron leaves. But overall, when I look at it, I'm not all that happy with putting him there at 13, but it was skewed by the immediate potential return on investment that you can get from someone like Colin Sexton. Pick number 14 is the Rock DJ. And that is Robert Williams of the Boston Celtics, a guy who that's significantly higher than where he was selected in the NBA draft from Texas A&M. Went with pick number 27 to the Celtics. I talked about him at length on the show on Monday talking about undervalued Dynasty guys. He averaged 16 and 14 with 4 blocks and 1.2 steals on 63% from the field. Free throws at 47% is a real concern. But if you go back to his freshman year, he was at 59%. So it's not like he can't hit them at a better rate. It was obviously piss poor from him last season, and you're in that punt free throw territory. But that shot blocking ability, the rebounding, the high percentage finishing, it's DeAndre Jordan. And that's the sort of numbers that you could potentially expect. Maybe he can have top 40 seasons. And if you wanted to take him ahead of Colin Sexton, ahead of Miles Bridges, I don't think that would be an incorrect decision as well. So his overall upside is huge. Now, there are many downsides to what the Rock DJ can do. His motor, his questionable behavior or off-court attitude are all real concerns. But he's in a great situation for that sort of shit to be corrected. So hopefully the Rock DJ can get his shit together and be a guy that we can see and realize that significant potential that he has. I think he can be an impact guy pretty much straight away in the NBA this season. The number 15 guy on my list is the Brooklyn Nets number 29 overall selection, and that's Dzanan Musa from Bosnia-Herzegovina. Goes to the Brooklyn Nets. Musa is a sharpshooting, 6'9", interchangeable position wing guy. And we know that these are players who we really value in the NBA. Guys being able to knock down the three. Now, his defensive stuff, we definitely need, he needs some work on that sort of thing. But he is a player who can provide value immediately. He's going to be coming over this season. He played in 23 minutes per game across Euro Cup and the Spanish League last season. 47% of his shots, 31 from 3, which is not great on 4 attempts. The rebounding rate's not that high. His steal rate's okay. Doesn't block any shots, but he comes over pretty much as a scorer. But again, a player who translational stuff really does like because of his offensive ability. And I think a guy like Dzanan Musa is a player that I'd be taking significantly higher than that overall spot that he was drafted in the draft, which was that pick 29. So I like Musa. I like the threes. I like the scoring. I like the free throws. He's got some rebounding upside. He's got some steal upside as well, but never going to block shots. I think this is the right spot for him because I put him here. Actually, that's not true because I'm not sure about Sexton at 13, but Dzanan Musa is a guy that I would jump forward ahead of some of these other guys in that zone with that offensive upside. The 16th guy on my list is Josh Okogie out of Georgia Tech. A wing that goes to Minnesota. Now, we should be expecting pretty much 0 from him this season because it's Tom Thibodeau. Unless this team can find a way to move off Andrew Wiggins and his large contract, which maybe is a possibility, Okogie is going to struggle to get minutes this season. He won't be a big part. But I think if we're looking in the next 5 to 6 years, he has got an ability to maybe be better than Sexton, to maybe be better than Musa, to maybe be better than even a guy like Miles Bridges. He's got that upside in him. High steal rate, decent block rate as a wing, 2 steals and 1 block per 40 minutes, 20 points. 82 from the line, 7 boards, 38% from 3 in both of his seasons at Georgia Tech. These are really strong numbers from Okogie, but you have to be willing to bear the growing pains from him in the Minnesota system where he's barely going to see the court for this season and maybe even next season. But you're taking a long-term view of this in Dynasty. That's how Dynasty leagues work. You're taking that long-term view of Okogie, and I think he's a guy, again, that jumps ahead of his actual draft position, who has that high steal and block rate, who can work into a Kawhi Leonard-ish, Robert Covington-ish type of defensive presence, and then have some offensive pop to his game as well. So I like him there at pick number 16. Let's have a look now at the remaining 4 guys on my list. At pick 17, it's Kevin Huerter of the Atlanta Hawks. We know what Huerter is, and he is a sharpshooter, but he's more than that. He is a guy who can handle the ball, who can generate assists. In his sophomore season at Maryland, per 40 minutes, he averaged 4 assists per game. They are really, really strong numbers. 17 points, hit 61% of his 2s and 42% of his 3s. Overall field goal percentage of 50. Again, very, very strong numbers. The defense wasn't great. 0.7 steals, 0.8 blocks. That's Marvin Bagley territory. But this guy's a shooting guard. He's not a center. But encouragingly, when you look at his freshman numbers at Maryland, 1.3 steals and 0.9 blocks. Now, it's not a big difference, especially in the blocks, but that's almost double the steal rate in his freshman season to his sophomore year. And playing with the Bucks and Mike Budenholzer, will he be a little bit more aggressive in a different system, playing a different role? Can he be a guy that, per 36 in the NBA, is able to take his steal rate up to 1.4 or 1.5? That's a possibility. It wasn't good in college, but the freshman signs were there. So maybe he can do that. But it's the efficiency, the three-point contributions from Herter that I like there, and the position he plays and his ability to knock down shots makes me think he has a role in the NBA. And that's when we get into this sort of area in Dynasty drafts. Does this guy have a role? Does he have a consistent spot in rotations for teams? And I think for Huerta, a wing who can handle, who can distribute, who can knock down threes, either self-created, coming off screens, pick and roll, pick and pop, all that sort of stuff. I think that gives him that value, and that's why I'd be looking at him mainly as a minutes type upside play, just because he's going to be finding himself in a rotation, for a considerable time in the NBA, and that's a lot of where that value comes from when we talk about guys and their overall dynasty type value. Let's look at the next guy. That's number 18 on this list. I've talked about him quite a bit on Monday's show as well, and that's Ali Akobo out of Pau Orthez in the French League. Played 33 games this season across the French League and Europe Cup. He didn't. Wrong year. Sorry, 36 games he played this year, 27 minutes, 49 from the field and 42 from three. He averaged 13.8 points, 4.7 assists, 0.9 steals, 2.7 rebounds, which are all fairly strong numbers when you look at the level of competition. A very athletic league, was able to drop points in big games. He's a big-sized guy, good wingspan, assists, steals, threes. All of this is really positive for Akobo. I think he can have an impact this season. I think he plays a lot more than some people are expecting. You look at the Carmelo stuff on 538. They don't project him to play hardly any minutes at all, 252. That is astonishingly low to me. I think he will have opportunities. He will start games this season. I think he does have significant upside and can be a starting point guard in the NBA. The 31st pick in the NBA draft, I'd be taking him at pick 18 in Dynasty Leagues, obviously a lot higher than that spot. Now, there's a guy that was picked in the top 10 of the actual NBA draft that you haven't heard me mention yet, and that is the Fort, Kevin Knox. Knox was a guy whose play at Kentucky didn't justify the 9th pick in the draft, but people loved him in workouts. They loved him in dinners. I'm not sure what that really means, but that's what happened. And the benefit of the doubt to Kentucky players who suck at Kentucky or seem one-dimensional, they are able to come into the NBA and change that sort of stuff around. Does Knox continue that run? I'm not sure. I don't really believe in him. I don't particularly like what he does from a translational point of view. As I've said many times, I translated 164 guys for this upcoming draft, and he came in at 156th. Poor field goal percentage, no steals, no blocks, bad rebounding, bad assists, hits threes. But the reason I've got him even at 19 is the fact that David Fizdale seems to like him and has been heavily implying that he will start him. Play Tim Hardaway at the 2, and play Frank Ntilikina and Trey Burke at the 1 and the 2 combination there, and put Kevin Knox straight at the 3. Maybe he moves up and plays him at the 4. Can he develop something defensively? Can he develop something in the assist game? I'm quite skeptical of that, but just having the faith of a coach immediately, giving him that opportunity makes me put him here at 19. I don't feel great about it. I don't feel confident that Kevin Knox is going to be a good player, and I didn't like the pick. But he did average 19 points per 40 for Kentucky last year, shot 34 from 3, and had almost 7 rebounds. But the lack of defense, the lack of creation, I guess the overall subpar rebounding numbers, the piss-poor advanced numbers, a box score plus minus of 4.8. Compare that to DRC's Zaire Smith and his 12. It's a really, really big difference, a PER of 17 and a below-average true shooting as well for Kevin Knox. But if we want to talk age, he's young. He's still really young, one of the youngest players in the draft. So that also, along with the Kentucky factor, does give him the benefit of the doubt when looking at their long-term dynasty value. The 20th player on my list is a guy who went pretty close to this in terms of his overall draft spot, and that's Lonnie Walker, the fourth now of the San Antonio Spurs. I think his role this season is going to be limited, but when we look at pure scoring type shooting guards, that's a position that with even though Danny Green opted in this season, the Spurs are going to need someone like that. I'm not sure his overall upside is great. His peripheral numbers aren't fantastic. 35% from three in Miami last season, 1.4 steals and 2.7 assists per 40 minutes to go with 16.6 points. Subpar box score plus minus and PER and real below average true shooting. And like Kevin Knox, his fantasy translations did not come across well. But I'm looking at volume type scorers who could be in a position to see themselves gain that volume in a couple of years, and a player that many people do really like, although I do have my doubts about his overall fantasy game. And that's why I'm sliding Lonnie Walker the fourth in there at number 20 on my Dynasty ranks. So to recap, we've got at number 1, Luka Doncic. Number 2, Triple J. Number 3, DeAndre Ayton. Number 4, Trae Young. Number 5, Mo Bamba.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
At number 6, Marvin Bagley III. Number 7, Wendell Carter Jr. Number 8, MIKAL Bridges. At number 9, Michael Porter Jr. At number 10, DRC, Zaire Smith. Number 11, Miles Bridges. Number 12, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Number 13, Colin Sexton. Number 14, The Rock DJ Robert Williams. At number 15, Janen Musa. At number 16, Josh Okogie. 17, Kevin Huerta. 18, Ali Okobo. 19, the Fort, Kevin Knox. And number 20, Lonnie Walker the fourth. That will do it for us today, guys. If you do like the podcast, go leave a 5-star rating or a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, and on Spotify, and on YouTube, of course. Thanks again to Elliot Class for really sexing up the YouTube graphics and this show. I hope you guys like the new presentation. Go and follow Elliot on Twitter at Elliot Class, and go give a thumbs up and subscribe on YouTube as well, and leave a comment below. Check out the rest of the Locked On Podcast Network, of course, and stay tuned to my Twitter account for details on the Red Rock redraft leagues. Details of that will be coming out in July, with drafts happening in September. Points leagues, head-to-head leagues, roto leagues, best ball leagues, tons of different stuff. Still got some Dynasty League positions available as well. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Ben Simmons.